economy, military modernization, and a prominent geostrategic location, India is also quite well poised to play a critical role, not only in its own neighborhood, but also across the globe. As India builds closer ties with countries in East and Southeast Asia, reemphasizes its ties with the Gulf Middle East, and increases its economic ties with Africa, will it be willing to play a bigger role? To discuss these questions and others, we're pleased to have Her Excellency Ambassador Nirupama Rao, the Indian ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Rao has had a very distinguished career in the Indian Foreign Service, spanning some 3 decades, including service most recently as Foreign Secretary. She has broad diplomatic experience, having served in posts in Moscow, Peru, Bolivia, Sri Lanka, and China. She is also, I should note, a poet, having published a volume, Rising Rain, in English, and her poems have also been translated into Chinese and Russian. I now have the pleasure of turning the microphone over to my colleague Hillel Fradkin, who will moderate our session today. Hillel directs our renowned Center on Islam, Democracy, and the Future of the Muslim World. Hillel is a scholar of some considerable note and has taught at Yale, the University of Chicago and Columbia, and has written also widely on Southeast Asian affairs. Hillel.
Thanks, Ken. I have a very simple task here today, which is was put as moderating. I understand that to mean directing traffic, which I understand from report in India can be a rather complicated task. I just wanted to explain a couple of, before inviting the ambassador to deliver her remarks, to explain a couple of ground rules. First, we have left out cards and some pens at your chairs. If you do have questions, please write them down. We won't solicit questions directly in the alternative fashion, and the cards will be collected and brought up here. Also, once the ambassador's remarks, formal remarks are completed, the rest of the session would be off the record. Thanks very much for your following these instructions. Madam Ambassador. Let me add that the ambassador is feeling a little ill and especially weak in the voice. So please be indulgent.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you also for asking me to speak to you on the challenges and opportunities that face India's foreign policy today. It's an honor to speak to such a distinguished group. I thought I would, in the course of my discourse today, describe the purposes, the goals which motivate and guide our foreign policy, and the outcomes that we seek to achieve, and how we have gone about doing that. The foremost task, of course, of our foreign policy is to enable the domestic transformation of India. And by this we mean making possible the transformation of India's economy, India's society, and promoting our values of pluralism, democracy, and socialism. And this requires us to work for a supportive external environment that is peaceful and that enables us to concentrate on our domestic tasks. And at the broadest level, our foreign policy seeks security, it seeks support from the international community as we build and we change our society and our economy. In the 60 years since its inception, our foreign policy has evolved. It has adjusted to meet new challenges and unprecedented crisis situations, as well as it's risen to meet the needs of intensified economic engagement with the world, an engagement that is designed to meet the needs of an increased inflow of capital, of technology, of ideas, and innovation for our development and our re-emergence as one of the world's leading economies. The extraordinary changes of the last 2 decades have fundamentally transformed India's economy and society. Consistent high economic growth has helped empower a large number of our citizens, and it's also led to an increased engagement of India with the outside world. As a new report, which many of you may have seen, it's called Non-Alignment 2.0, points out if we can maintain high growth rates, leverage that growth to enhance the capabilities of our citizens, and maintain robust democratic traditions and institutions, there are few limits to India's global role and influence. Our economic growth requires deepened economic engagement with the outside world at all levels: trade, labor, technology, and ideas. And India now has an increasing range of interests which are anchored in different parts of the world and which stem from a wide range of factors. For instance, the need to secure energy and other vital natural resources, the imperative of maintaining open shipping lanes, the imperative of seeking investments and trade opportunities overseas, the need to secure trade access, and so on. At the same time, the global situation is undergoing a tremendous evolution. Spurred by advances in technology and in global communications, we have witnessed the emergence of new opportunities, enhanced productivity, and higher living standards across the world. People across remote corners of our globe can be in touch with each other in real time, thanks to the rapid and dramatic development of internet technologies. Developments in distant places which once took time to impact other parts of the world are now known almost instantaneously. Technology is empowering people, and one example of that change is how events relating to the Arab Spring were triggered last year. The very same processes of globalization and technological revolution have also exposed our collective vulnerability. The benefits of globalization have been uneven, and new challenges have been thrown up, like growing inequity and equality across and within nations, volatility in the financial market and environmental deterioration, and groups of radicals, extremists, hackers, pirates, terrorists have sought to utilize the new technologies to gain asymmetrical advantage. The new global order is as yet not fully formed. Politically as well, we are entering a period of transition from the dominance of a single power to a more balanced distribution of power in the international system, short of pure multipolarity. New groupings are emerging, and we are witnessing the rise of a new global power in China. Challenges in our immediate neighborhood, particularly in Pakistan and Afghanistan, also test the international system's ability to adjust to these changes. As I mentioned earlier, our strategic goals are basically to enable the domestic transformation of India by accelerated growth and a strategic autonomy that safeguards the national interest at all times. And this we project in the overall global context. These goals will not change for a long time, as we'll need time to achieve them. But it also does not mean that India is going to be insular or inward looking. On the contrary, our engagement with the world has accelerated and grown exponentially over the last few years. We've benefited from our integration into the global economy since the 1990s. And this engagement is only bound to grow as India actively pursues its interests in the world and remains ready to contribute within her capacity. We want to maintain an open global order at many different levels. Our vision of a secular, pluralistic, tolerant society within the country, embracing a multiplicity and diversity of opinions and outlook, is sought to be articulated in our dealings with the world. Against this background, let me briefly elaborate some of the main priority areas of focus in our foreign policy. In terms of geography, India's foreign policy has always regarded the concept of neighborhood as one of widening concentric circles around a central axis of historical and cultural commonality. From this point of view, we've given due priority to the development of relations with countries in Asia. An article of steadfast faith in our foreign policy has been to ensure a peaceful, secure, and stable neighborhood so as to safeguard our own peace, security, and development within our borders. And it is with this perspective that India is developing a mutually beneficial relationship with all her neighbors. In South Asia, India's vision has been one of encouraging regional integration to bring about peace and prosperity for the more than 1.5 billion people living in our region. As part of this vision, this geography of hope, we have been implementing a policy of asymmetric engagement in providing greater market access to our neighbors, which enables integration in a mutually beneficial manner. We understand very well that we cannot be insulated from our neighborhood. Our growth and our prosperity has a beneficial impact on the rest of the region, and increasingly we will have to build closer connectivities in trade, in communications, and other networks of interaction between ourselves and our neighbors. At the same time, instability and centrifugal forces, such as those arising from religious extremism and terrorism in our neighborhood, can and do threaten our own security and development. In India, we have and we will continue to take appropriate domestic measures to strengthen our security, but the global nature of the threat requires that global efforts to tackle the problem be intensified. In our region, for example, we are focused on helping build Afghan institutions and capacities in order to deal with such threats. We have been engaged in developmental assistance efforts in Afghanistan at considerable human and economic cost. Our total assistance, amounting to over $2 billion has been guided by the priorities of the Afghan government and people. Additionally, we are supplementing our efforts with joint projects with the United States in areas such as in capacity building, agriculture, and women's empowerment in Afghanistan. In fact, I'm very happy to see Ambassador Roma here in the audience. This was one of the areas that was very much in focus when we discussed Afghanistan, when you were ambassador and I was foreign secretary. We have also been fully supportive of U.S. efforts to fight terrorism in Afghanistan and bring stability there. In this regard, we are keenly watching recent developments. Too much is at stake, both for Afghanistan and for our region, in what happens in that country. China, as another immediate neighbor, is a key priority of India's foreign policy. We have attempted to establish a strategic and cooperative partnership with China. It has emerged as the largest trading partner of India, and our engagement is now multifaceted. The maintenance of peace and tranquility on our borders with China and the quest for a peaceful, negotiated settlement of the outstanding boundary question are areas of crucial importance in our bilateral relationship. Naturally, as between any two large countries, there are areas of convergence as well as fields of divergence between our nations. We will maintain dialogue with China with the objective of minimizing such differences or bridging them. Looking beyond this immediate neighborhood, we have also been expanding our circles of engagement, starting with Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean region, West Asia, Central Asia, Africa, and the world's major powers. I've often said that Southeast Asia begins with Northeast India. Myanmar is our land bridge to the countries of the ASEAN. Today, winds of change are blowing through Myanmar. We have welcomed these developments and are working with the people and the government of Myanmar to help build their capacities. Through our Look East policy, we have tried to reconnect and reach out in the civilizational space we share with our near neighbors in Southeast Asia since the early 1990s. We are building on our strong bilateral ties, expanding our roles in regional organizations, and working to build comprehensive economic partnerships. India and ASEAN have put in place one of the largest free trade agreements on goods. We hope that the early conclusion of a similar free trade agreement in services and investments between India and the ASEAN will significantly broaden and deepen this process. This year marks the 20th anniversary of commencement of our dialogue partnership with ASEAN, and we are adding content to our economic relations with the region through growing strategic and security engagement. We firmly believe that our success, and indeed that of the larger international community, depends on our ability to forge an inclusive architecture of economic integration and security cooperation for the Asia-Pacific, or the Indo-Pacific, as it is increasingly being termed, and thereby create a basis for a stable and prosperous Asia. An issue that has gained prominence in recent times is that of maritime security. Ensuring the security of sea lines of communication is vital for the continued economic well-being of the region. India sits astride crucial sea lanes of communication across the Indian Ocean, through which almost 60,000 ships carry merchandise and energy from the Gulf to East Asia every year. The security of these lanes is increasingly challenged by the rising incidence of piracy, as well as such other threats as trafficking in arms, drugs, and human beings, and linkages with transnational criminal gangs. India has contributed its naval capabilities to help safeguard these vital sea lines of communication. For instance, we are cooperating with naval forces of other countries, including of the U.S., in the Gulf of Aden and off the coast of Somalia to counter piracy and to ensure the safety and security of commercial shipping. In this regard, we welcome the fact that issues such as terrorism, prevention and response to natural disasters, piracy, protecting sea lanes of communication, and drug trafficking are also being discussed at the East Asia Summit. These are the challenges that cut across national boundaries and require cooperative responses. In our extended neighborhood to our west, we enjoy traditionally close political, economic, and cultural linkages with the countries of West Asia. These countries are among our largest trading partners. Our trade with the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC countries, amounted to $130 billion last year. Secondly, close to 50% of our crude oil requirements are met by the region. Thirdly, the region hosts more than 6 million Indians who contribute to the economies of the region and remit significant foreign exchange back into their households in India. Accordingly, we have a vital stake in the peace and stability of the region and the continued progress and prosperity of the area. As a democracy committed to the secular ideals of our founding fathers, our hope is that the secular democratic spirit that we saw blooming at the outset of the Arab Spring last year does not dissipate to be overcome by extreme ideology. I'd like to say a few words about Iran in this regard. We have consistently said that Iran must cooperate with the IAEA to resolve all the outstanding issues about its nuclear program that continue to raise doubts in the minds of the international community. We acknowledge that Iran has the right to utilize the benefits of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, but this right has to be exercised in conformity with international obligations that Iran has voluntarily undertaken as a non-nuclear weapon state party to the NPT. We have maintained that Iran must comply with these obligations fully and transparently. But we also hope that these issues are resolved peacefully. The need of the hour is diplomatic drive and creativity to address the situation. In this regard, we feel it's a good sign that the P5+1 countries and Iran have agreed to have another round of talks in the near future. It is our hope that all sides will utilize this opportunity to engage in a constructive and serious manner to find a way forward. This will not be an easy task, but we do believe that if the parties concerned demonstrate seriousness of purpose, then gradually issues can be resolved. We do not see our relationship with Iran as either being inconsistent with our non-proliferation objectives or in contradiction with the relationships that we have with our friends in West Asia or with the United States. As a near neighbor and our only surface access to Central Asia and Afghanistan, engagement with Iran is of relevance and meaning to us. Even though we do import oil from Iran, the share of such imports continues to decline and is currently under 10% of our overall imports. I'd like to also emphasize that India, as a responsible member of the international community, takes its obligations in all these areas most seriously. We have scrupulously adhered to the multilateral sanctions against Iran as mandated by the United Nations, and we remain fully engaged with the United States administration and Congress on this issue. Looking beyond Asia, we have tried to build mutually beneficial ties with all the major powers, foremost among which is the United States. Our relationship with the United States is in fact built on our shared values and converging interests. It is based on our fundamental belief that we have mutually beneficial stakes in each other's success. We have in the last decade set up a comprehensive architecture of engagement based on broad political support in each of our countries, strong people-to-people linkages, and growing habits of cooperation. Over the past 10 years, the two governments have put in place a very robust agenda of cooperation in our partnership, a partnership that is, to quote Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, founded on both principles and pragmatism. In the months ahead, as we plan for the third meeting of the Strategic Dialogue in Washington later this summer, it would be our joint endeavor to build on this foundation, consolidate on the work that has already been done, and to implement the initiatives that have been agreed upon to qualitatively improve the relationship. The overseas Indian communities have been natural partners in India's growth and development, and we remain committed to deepening our engagement with the overseas Indians in order to accelerate the pace of economic and social change in India. We are fortunate to have an Indian American community in this country whose capability and contribution instills great confidence. We take immense pride in the contributions of the 3 million strong Indian Americans whose vigor and drive have added new vitality to our relationship. Their ability to serve their adopted home in this country and make such sterling contributions to its society and economy is what, in my view, makes the Indian American such an important component of India's growing engagement with the United States. Outside bilateral relationships with various countries and groups, there are global issues which constitute yet another set of challenges that we need to successfully tackle to achieve the outcomes that we desire. These would include ensuring energy security and sustainable development, food security, and dealing with issues vital to peace and security such as terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Indeed, in India, we attach importance to our strategic partnership with the United States, both for advancing global peace, stability, and progress, as well as in the pursuit of India's national developmental goals. The interlinked issue of energy security and climate change can pose the biggest hurdle in our quest to achieve our social and economic transformation. In addressing our energy requirements, we do not intend to follow the business as usual approach or the conspicuous consumption pattern that may exist in some developed countries. At present, our own greenhouse gas emissions are only about 4% of the global level of emissions, even with 17% of the global population. We have also set out ambitious goals for increasing the share of solar energy, wind energy, nuclear energy, and clean coal technology in our energy mix on the one hand, and on the other to improve overall energy efficiency. We have committed to keep per capita emissions below the average of those in the developed countries and to reduce the emissions intensity of India's GDP by 20 to 25% by 2020 as compared to 2005. We're also working with the international community to meet this challenge. With the US, for example, we have established a joint center for clean energy research, which will encourage the development of new technologies which are affordable and reliable. India believes that we need to address this common challenge through a collective response based on equity, fairness, historical responsibilities, resources, and capacity. Ensuring food security is another challenge that we share with the global community. While India is self-sufficient, we do need to improve our productivity further and improve the incomes of our rural population. India has launched a national agricultural innovation project to contribute to the sustainable transformation of the Indian agricultural sector. And increasingly, we are using technology to find innovative solutions. Satellite technology is being used for better crop productivity, efficient development of irrigation and drinking water projects. IT and cell phones, 900 million of them at last count in India, are being used to connect farmers to markets directly. Here again, we are partnering with the US to seek mutually beneficial solutions. Our efforts now span across borders as we assist countries in our region to strengthen food security. In Afghanistan, we are on the one hand providing wheat, and on the other hand, through our development cooperation with the Afghan people, we are developing their capacities to market their agricultural produce. In Africa, India is committed to establishing an India-Africa Institute of Agriculture and Rural Development and an India-Africa Food Processing Cluster. We're also working with the US in 3 African countries in this area. Terrorism continues to pose a threat to international peace and stability. India, having been a victim of terrorism for many decades, has worked with the international community to strengthen the international framework to deal with this threat. In the UN, for instance, we have taken the initiative to pilot a comprehensive convention on international terrorism, or the CCIT, with the objective of providing a comprehensive legal framework to combat terrorism. Given the global nature of the threat, we are working with international partners, including the US, to tackle this problem. The threat is compounded today given the possibility of the intersection between terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We have been affected by clandestine nuclear proliferation in our neighborhood. Today, India is constructively engaged in international efforts to enhance nuclear security. In the long term, such threats can be met by universal and non-discriminatory disarmament, a cause that India has championed for many years. Ladies and gentlemen, I've tried to reflect on the broad trends and critical issues that we face today in our foreign policy and which we would need to successfully manage. As we do so, India will also continue to be a responsible member of the international community and will continue to play its legitimate role on the global stage. Thank you.